Earlier this year, Tony Stewart announced his departure from NASCAR, withdrawing the Stewart-Haas Racing team from the sport. He stated that he wasn't happy with the direction NASCAR was heading towards and that he would rather focus on his other ventures in motorsports. But now, Stewart just spoke in a podcast where he absolutely trashed NASCAR. In recent months, there's been a lot of talk regarding the new charter agreement and how NASCAR behaved during the negotiation process. There have been several reports and statements suggesting that NASCAR coerced the teams into signing the agreement, even though it was lopsided in favor of NASCAR. Two teams, 23XI Racing and FRM, refused to sign the agreement and filed an antitrust lawsuit against Jim France Jr. and NASCAR. This became a huge deal for the sport. Tony Stewart saw this chaos coming and decided to leave the sport. Right now, it looks as though he made the right decision. Here's what he said. 98% of the race fans have no clue. They don't know the stuff that I'm talking about off to the side that are elements that I don't like. What it was when I started and where it's at now, the direction it's going. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't necessarily like it. There's elements that I'm very disappointed in. That's okay, not everybody has to agree on it. For me, that's why it's the right time to make a change. Later, he spoke more specifically about the new charter agreements. The charter agreements are a joke, Stewart added. When someone like Hendrick says, I just got tired of arguing with them, do you think Hendrick runs his business and in negotiations just says, I'm just going to sign this agreement because I'm tired of arguing with you? Hendrick's never done that a day in his life. So if people aren't smart enough to read between the lines and figure out what that means, then you're all missing the whole big picture. It's just an area that I don't want to be a part of anymore. I'm an old school guy when it comes to racing. Over the years, NASCAR has completely dominated the stock car racing industry, leaving the teams with no alternatives if they choose to leave NASCAR. Negotiations for the new charter agreement have been ongoing for the past 2 years. And after 2 years of negotiation, NASCAR just came in at the last minute and said, here's the new agreement, sign it or leave the sport. Hendrick was certainly not happy about this. I think we worked really hard for 2 years and it got down to, you're not going to make everybody happy, Hendrick said. And I think it got down to, I was just tired. Not everybody was happy. But in any negotiation, you're not going to get everything you want. And so I felt it was a fair deal and we protected the charters, which was number one. We got the payout increase. I feel a lot of things we didn't like, we got taken out. So I'm happy with where we were. Hendrick's remarks about signing NASCAR's 2025 charter agreement highlight the frustrations and lack of transparency that many teams have expressed throughout the negotiation process. According to Hendrick, the 2-year negotiation period left him exhausted and feeling forced to accept a compromise that wasn't entirely satisfactory, but ensured certain protections for the charters. His comments underline a broader issue with the negotiation process. It appeared designed to pressure the teams into compliance rather than reaching equitable terms through genuine dialogue. The ongoing lawsuit by 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports alleges that NASCAR did not negotiate in good faith during these talks. The plaintiffs claim that NASCAR used manipulative tactics to coerce teams into signing a deal that disproportionately benefits NASCAR, while limiting teams' financial security and autonomy. They argue that NASCAR's centralized control over revenue distribution leaves teams reliant on sponsorships and deprives them of their fair share of the sport's profits. Hendrick's admission reinforces these claims by illustrating how even influential organizations like Hendrick Motorsports felt pressured into the agreement due to exhaustion rather than satisfaction with the terms. This sentiment aligns with 23XI Racing and FRM's position, as their refusal to sign the agreement stemmed from the belief that it failed to address the systemic inequities in NASCAR's financial structure. While Hendrick ultimately signed to ensure stability for his team, the dissatisfaction voiced by one of NASCAR's most prominent team owners adds credibility to the plaintiff's argument. It suggests that NASCAR prioritized expedience over fair and inclusive negotiations, further fueling tensions within the sport and driving 23XI and FRM to take legal action in pursuit of structural change. Tony Stewart's comments about his decision to exit NASCAR with Stewart-Haas Racing after the 2024 season highlight his deep dissatisfaction with the sport's current direction. Stewart emphasized that his frustration stemmed from behind-the-scenes issues that many fans are unaware of, pointing to broader concerns about the fundamental changes in NASCAR over the years. Stewart mentioned that what NASCAR represented when he started his career is vastly different from its current state. He expressed disappointment in the sport's evolving priorities, indicating that its direction diverged from his vision of what racing should be. Stewart's decision to leave reflects a disconnection with NASCAR's administrative choices, particularly concerning the business model and governance of the sport. These comments align with his broader critiques, including concerns about sponsorship difficulties, revenue imbalances, and legal turmoil involving teams like 23XI Racing and FRM. Stewart's exit underscores the growing divide between NASCAR's leadership and some of its most dedicated participants. The antitrust lawsuit brought by 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports against NASCAR has the potential to fundamentally alter the way the sport operates, particularly in the distribution of finances and the negotiation of team agreements. The core issue revolves around the perceived imbalance of revenue sharing between NASCAR and its teams. NASCAR currently retains a substantial share of the revenue, leaving teams heavily reliant on sponsorships to cover operational costs. The lawsuit could force NASCAR to disclose more details about how its financial agreements are structured, including its split with teams. If the courts rule in favor of 23XI and FRM, it may lead to a more equitable revenue-sharing model, ensuring teams receive a larger portion of the sport's profits. The case highlights dissatisfaction with the charter system, which guarantees teams participation and a share of the revenue. The outcome of the lawsuit could result in a restructuring of this system to address concerns about fairness and negotiation leverage, particularly if the court finds evidence of coercion. Teams have argued that NASCAR's negotiating tactics leave them with little room to advocate for their interests. A ruling in favor of the plaintiffs could establish legal precedents, requiring NASCAR to engage in good faith negotiations with teams, giving them a stronger voice in shaping agreements. The lawsuit challenges the centralized authority of NASCAR. A favorable ruling for the teams could empower them to demand greater involvement in decision-making processes, balancing the power dynamics between the governing body and its participants. Smaller teams like FRM often struggle to remain financially viable under the current system. Changes resulting from this case could create a more level playing field, assuming that all teams, not just top-tier ones, can compete sustainably. If 23XI and FRM are successful, it could set a precedent for other teams to challenge NASCAR's practices, potentially reshaping the landscape of the sport. The lawsuit could drive NASCAR to adopt a model similar to other major leagues, like the NFL or NBA, where revenue sharing is most balanced between the governing body and teams. While this would address some of the team's financial woes, it might also create a more transparent and collaborative environment for the sport. The case underscores the growing tensions between NASCAR's business model and the sustainability of its teams. Its resolution could serve as a pivotal moment, redefining NASCAR's future and strengthening the sport's foundation for years to come. In the face of mounting challenges and growing dissatisfaction among teams, NASCAR stands at a pivotal crossroads. The departure of a figure as influential as Tony Stewart, coupled with the ongoing legal battles spearheaded by 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports, highlights the urgent need for change within the sport. This moment represents more than a dispute over contracts. It's a call for a recalibration of NASCAR's financial and governance structures to better reflect the needs of its teams and the evolving motorsports landscape. As the lawsuit unfolds, it'll test the balance of power between NASCAR's governing body and the teams that fuel its success. Whether this leads to greater equity, transparency, and collaboration remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the outcomes of these disputes will shape the future of NASCAR for years to come. For the sport to thrive, it must embrace reform and ensure that its foundational partnerships with teams are built on mutual trust and fairness. What are your thoughts on how NASCAR has been handling the negotiations for the new charter agreement? Post your thoughts in the comment section below.